Welcome. These weren't adventurers or folklore. These are pirates. They burned cities, enslaved thousands, and forced empires to the table. Let's begin. At number 10, Laurens de Graaf. May 1683, Veracruz, the most fortified Spanish port in the Americas. De Graaf landed approximately 1,300 men before dawn, and by morning the city was his. Around 6,000 citizens were taken hostage, and when Spain's relief fleet finally arrived, de Graaf was already gone. He'd started his career as a Spanish gunner and turned that training against the empire that taught him. In 1685, he sacked Campeche and held it for 2 months. De Graaf didn't raid ships, he attacked cities. He died in 1704 on Saint-Domingue, not in battle, not in chains, but of fever, still free. At number 9, Jean Lafitte. Louisiana Governor William C. Claiborne placed a $300 bounty on Lafitte's head, and Lafitte responded by offering $1,000 for the governor. Exact figures vary by source. The point was the audacity. He ran a pirate state out of Barataria Bay, controlling what moved in and out of New Orleans. The government wanted him dead, and the merchants needed him alive. In 1814, the British offered him cash, rank, and land to attack New Orleans. He declined, warned the Americans, and was arrested for it, then released when American General Andrew Jackson needed his guns and his men. At the Battle of New Orleans, January 1815, the British assault collapsed. Pardoned, he returned to piracy and disappeared into the Gulf of Mexico. No confirmed death, no final capture. At number 8, François L'Olonnais. He beheaded the entire crew of a captured Spanish ship, kept one man alive, and handed him a letter to deliver. I shall never henceforward give quarter to any Spaniard whatsoever. He'd arrived in the Caribbean as an indentured servant, and when his term ended, he didn't forgive. By the mid-1660s, he commanded 8 ships and had sacked Maracaibo and Gibraltar on the Venezuelan coast. Spanish soldiers in the region began refusing orders to face him. During one interrogation, a prisoner refused to talk, so L'Olonnais cut out his heart and held it in front of the next prisoner. The next man talked. According to Alexandre Exquemelin, a buccaneer surgeon who sailed with these men and wrote it down in 1678, he was later ambushed in Central America, captured, and did not survive. At number 7, Henry Morgan. Portobello, 1668. Priests and nuns used as human shields to breach the walls. Maracaibo, 1669. Trapped behind a Spanish naval blockade, he converted a vessel into a fireboat and sent it into the lead Spanish ship. Panama City, 1671. Every assessment said it was impossible, but he crossed the jungle, broke the river fortifications, and burned the city to the ground. He was arrested after Panama and sent to London to face trial. Upon his arrival, King Charles II knighted him. Appointed Lieutenant Governor of Jamaica, he then spent the rest of his career hunting and hanging his former crew. At number 6, Bartholomew Roberts. Black Bart. Over 400 ships in 4 years. No pirate in the Golden Age came close. Kidnapped into piracy in 1719 and captain within 6 weeks. Didn't drink, didn't gamble, ran his ship with military discipline and wore silk doing it. His flag showed him standing on 2 skulls labeled ABH and AMH, a Barbadian's head, a Martinican's head. The governors of those islands had declared him wanted, and he was making a point. He raided the Newfoundland fishing fleets and at one point held 22 ships simultaneously, operating across the Atlantic Basin with the same effectiveness. In February 1722, the Royal Navy found his fleet off West Africa. His entire crew were drunk. Roberts was killed by grapeshot, buried at sea per his own orders, and 52 of his crew were hanged in the largest pirate trial in history. At number 5, Blackbeard. Real name Edward Teach. He started as a privateer sailor under Benjamin Hornigold, operating out of Nassau in the Bahamas, the pirate republic that briefly made the Caribbean ungovernable. When Hornigold retired and took a royal pardon, Teach did not. He captured a French slave vessel, armed it with 40 guns, and renamed it Queen Anne's Revenge. In 2 years, he took over 45 vessels and became the most feared name on the American colonial coast. He planted slow-burning fuses into his beard and lit them in combat, surrounding himself in smoke while ships watched from the water. Most surrendered without firing. He understood that fear was the weapon, and the violence was almost secondary. In May 1718, he brought 4 ships into Charleston Harbor, sealed it, and took prominent citizens hostage. The ransom demand wasn't gold, it was a chest of medicine. The colonial government paid. 6 months later in November, he was cornered at Ocracoke Inlet. It took 5 gunshot wounds and approximately 20 sword cuts to put him down, and Royal Navy Lieutenant Robert Maynard took his head and hung it from the bowsprit. At number 4, Kanhoji Angre. The British East India Company tried to break him. The Portuguese tried. The Dutch tried. For 30 years, Angre controlled the western coast of India, impassable to European shipping without his permission, and all 3 failed. Kanhoji Angre was the Sarkar, otherwise known as the Admiral of the Maratha Navy. This was the dominant Indian power resisting European expansion on the subcontinent. He built his own coastal fortresses and designed his own warships for the specific terrain. The Europeans came for him 3 times, a joint British-Portuguese fleet in 1707, the British alone in 1718, and a British-Mughal alliance in 1720. He turned all 3 away. He died in 1729, in command and in his own fortress. The East India Company didn't break him, they outlasted him. At number 3, Hayreddin Barbarossa. Feared by the Pope, the Holy Roman Emperor, the King of Spain, and Venice simultaneously. He wasn't on the margins of geopolitics, he was reshaping it. He started as a privateer alongside his brother Arouj. When Arouj was killed by Spanish forces in 1518, he aligned with the Ottoman Sultan and was given the resources of an empire. What followed was systematic. He took Algiers, sacked Tunis, and ravaged the Italian coast. 4,000 prisoners from Ischia alone, thousands more from Lipari. His raids sent panic through Rome. In 1538, he met the Holy League at Preveza, a military alliance assembled by the Pope, backed by Venice, Spain, and the Knights of Malta, specifically to stop him. They brought 302 ships. He brought 122. He won. He built the Ottoman naval base in Algiers. It dominated the Mediterranean for a century and a half after his death. He didn't just raid, he built. He died in Constantinople in 1546, in his palace, an old man, the most feared admiral in the world, to the end. At number 2, Dragut. Turgut Reis, Barbarossa's student, and by Barbarossa's own account, his superior. Trained as a cannoneer, sailor, and siege specialist, he was captured in 1540 and spent 4 years as a galley slave before Barbarossa ransomed him. What came next was worse for everyone else. In 1551, he enslaved the entire population of Gozo, a Maltese island in the Mediterranean, between 5,000 and 6,000 people, every man, woman, and child taken in a single operation. 3 years later, he sacked Vieste, a coastal town in southern Italy. 5,000 killed, 6,000 taken. The numbers come from contemporary records. At Jerba in 1560, he faced a Christian alliance of 200 ships, with 86 of his own, and broke them. He died at the Siege of Malta in 1565, approximately 80 years old and still commanding. A cannonball struck nearby and the shockwave killed him. And both Ottoman and Christian accounts agree his death turned the siege. Malta held because Dragut was gone. And at number 1, Qingxia. 1,800 ships, 80,000 pirates, a naval force larger than most sovereign nations. Born in Guangzhou in 1775, she married Zheng Yi in 1801, commander of a major pirate confederation, and immediately took an active role in running it, managing finances and expanding the network. When he died in 1807, the men who expected to inherit the fleet were outmaneuvered. She took sole command. She imposed a legal code, disobeying orders, theft, desertion, all punishable by execution. Female captives were protected. 80,000 people require order. She didn't just command a fleet, she ran a state. Villages and towns across the Pearl River Delta paid her protection taxes. Coastal trade moved on her terms. At her peak, legitimate shipping across the South China Sea could barely operate without her permission. In 1809, the Qing dynasty sent a military response, 400 junks, a full imperial campaign. She destroyed or captured most of it. The Portuguese dispatched warships from Macau to assist the Chinese. She defeated those too. At the Battle of the Tiger's Mouth, the British East India Company armed its merchant vessels specifically to counter her. It wasn't enough. 3 of the most powerful forces operating in Asia came for her in the same period. None of them could touch her. In 1810, China offered amnesty. She negotiated her own terms, kept her wealth and her ships, and opened a gambling house in Guangzhou. She died in 1844, aged 69, wealthy and free, never defeated. She chose to stop. 10 pirates. Some burned cities. Some enslaved thousands. All of them reshaped the waters they sailed. We hope you enjoyed this video. See you in the next one.